RiseAbsorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, RiseAbsorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
Last week, I got to attend the Canadian Agri-Food in a Risky World event put on by CAPI, that's the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. I was asked to moderate a panel on whether or not Canadian agri-food, so farming and agriculture, was equipped to handle the risks it's currently facing. We unpacked all the different kinds of risk, at least as an outline. So we talked about policy risk, geopolitical risk, trade risk, climate risk. There are several different layers and kinds of risk on a farm. Some are ones that we want or need some sort of protection from. So there are things like crop insurance or risk management programming. But some risks are, of course, calculated ones. I mean, let's face it, you're never guaranteed a harvest, but we still put the crop in. And the payment is the hope that you've got enough yield and a good enough price to make a little money. That's the risk-reward trade-off. We did talk, though, because it's a policy event and it's in Ottawa. It was beautiful, by the way, at the National Arts Centre. When we talk about whether or not Canadian agriculture is ready to face the risk ahead when it comes to, let's say, policy or some of those risk management programs I just talked about, one of the key things that was brought up by a panelist and was discussed in the room is that agriculture and Canadian agriculture is complex. There are complex and sometimes separated value chains that feed into one another. We have trade-dependent industries. We have domestic industries. There were questions from in the room like, how do we leverage, let's say, small scale food production? How do we grow it to be medium scale, large scale, and maybe even export ready? One of the profound things that eventually came out of this panel discussion was that at times, maybe more often than we'd like to admit, one aspect of the value chain doesn't even know the other aspect exists, let alone can work together. So thinking back to that comment about small-scale food production, and before you sort of roll your eyes and be like, oh, Lenny, like not everybody needs to like make jam in their basement and then eventually sell it around the world. But hold up for a sec, because this example actually sort of proves part of our bigger issue. How does someone who has potentially, so think about it. Let's say you've got, your grandfather's spice rub recipe or your grandmother's flapper pie or something really cool that you're always told, oh my gosh, I wish I could get this in a store or whatever. Would you know how to scale up? Would you know where to go for grant opportunities? Would you know what food regulations you needed to meet to even be able to sell this? These are all things that, yes, if you do enough research, you probably can find answers for. But realistically, if we think about it even larger scale, if we think about perhaps the incoming generation or the upcoming generation of people in agriculture that maybe want to diversify or change a business, do they know where to go for more information? Do they know where to go for potential funding or financing that's maybe outside the realm of your regular bank? Because frankly, we all know where that ends up. And that's, if you don't have equity, they're probably not going to talk to you. Then it translates, of course, to the policy discussion. One of the key things that we talked about at this event was that right now we're in a moment where the federal government is looking for nation-building projects. We talked about this on the issues panel on Friday on what would a nation-building project that was agriculture-focused, that was agri-centric, what would that look like? And I'd love your ideas on this one, because I have some ideas, or I have some ideas or components. And Kelvin gave his answer on Friday. Tyler McCann gave his answer on Friday as well. But what would a nation-building agricultural, farming, ag and food project look like? Because I think what I'm getting at here is that one of the key components that's missing in our advancement of Canadian agriculture, in our unlocking of potential, is the communications piece. And I know I work in words, and Sean can roll his eyes at me and say, words matter. But to butcher a phrase, it's communication, stupid. And that's a play on, it's the economy, stupid. You might have to Google it or look up where that's from. But realistically, we have several parts of our value chain, and our governments included, and whether that's municipal, provincial, or federal, or whether that's within the departments, within a government, we don't necessarily all talk to each other. We don't always communicate what we need to the other step in the chain, backwards or forwards. And we tend, when we have events or those sorts of things, they tend to be one group of people that attends them. I will say that from the perspective of my role in the world and RealAgriculture's role in agriculture, this is one of the things we try to bridge, whether it's through the radio show and the diverse voices we bring in, or things like our connection with Cappy and being able to talk about policy. But realistically, we need really strong communicators and strong leadership for our producer groups, for our value chains that are willing to sit down at the same table and have an exploratory conversation to say, hey, what do you need? What would be helpful? How can I help in my role get what you need to do done? And I think if we can all work on the communication piece, we may be able to move some of these big pieces forward. And to pat myself on the back, this was my take-home message on Wednesday, and that was before Thursday when Arlene Dickinson closed out the conference on a panel as well. Her key message to agriculture, to everyone in that room, was, what's your ask? And that's communication, stupid.